So first question is like, what inspired you to pursue filmmaking, and was there a specific moment or influence in your life that solidified this path?
Okay. Well, I am a kid. I come from a family of actors. So my mother, my father, and my sister were all actors when I was growing up. I remember one of my first memories was the backstage of the play they were rehearsing, and I was playing with my toys, and they were rehearsing. I was listening to them rehearsing roles in a Dario Fo play, an Italian writer, and I have a lot of memories of this rehearsals and this plays. Later, my sister, my older sister, who is 7 years older than me, she started to learn acting classes, and I was also going every year to watch her final year presentations. So I was watching my sister, my older sister, who was a role model for me, rehearsing and memorizing lines and memorizing Shakespeare. So yeah, I very early I decided that I wanted to work with actors, but I also very early decided that I didn't want to become an actor because I was too shy. So I wanted to direct them. I wanted to play with them. I wanted to be in a rehearsal room with them, but not acting with them. So I decided I wanted to become a director. That was very, very early. I think when I was 10 years old, I thought I wanted to be a writer. And then I started to decide that maybe I wanted to be a writer and a director. And then as I got older, the directing side of me was winning over because I became very cinephile. I was watching a lot of films, and so at some point I was in doubt if I wanted to be a theater director or a cinema director. And then when I was 18, I got a job as an intern in a film, and I was in love with film. And I also watched Faces by John Cassavetes in the cinema in a retrospective they did here in Rio about Cassavetes. And when I watched Faces, I decided to become a film director because it was then and there that I realized that it was possible to do what I wanted to do with actors in cinema. Because before I had this prejudice that maybe cinema was not the best place to work with actors, that if I wanted to work with actors, I should best go to theater. But when I watched Cassavetes, I said, no, it's okay. I can do exactly what I want with actors in cinema. So that was the moment.
How did you get your first job? Like you knew them?
No, my father was an actor in the film, so he asked them to put me as an intern.
And you have you attended any film school?
Yes, later I started to. We don't have we didn't have a film school in Rio in my city, so I did journalism. I enrolled in journalism school, and I really disliked it. I really, really disliked it. I strongly disliked it. So I abandoned it, and I went to Madrid to study cinema and theater in workshops. In Madrid, I was looking for a film school that I wanted to, that maybe I could go in Madrid to a film school, but I didn't like very much the film school they had there. I thought it was too old school, too they were in love with the American films from the 50s, so I loved Cassavetes and and Tarkovsky, so they weren't at all into that. So then from Madrid I went to Cuba to make a two weeks workshop on directing actors, and I fell in love with the school. I felt that was the perfect place to study cinema because it was a very practical. It was very based on the practical side of cinema. They shoot a lot. They give you a lot of exercises to shoot, and it's an amazing environment where you have nothing to do other than cinema. So you watch a lot of films. You do a lot of extracurricular films, and fell in love with the school. So I made the tests From Madrid, I made a test for the Cuban Film School, and I went to study there. And then I graduated in Cuba in 2004 in film directing.
Okay, okay, great, great, great. So let's talk about your film, Malu. It is said that it's a very personal, like personal film from your own experience. So, like, how was such an intimate story? Like, you wanted to tell it into a visual medium. Why you wanted to tell it into a visual medium?
Well, the film is about my mother. It's a very personal story, when my mother died in 2013, I decided that I wanted to do a film about her. We organized a very uncommon funeral for her. It was a funeral with wine and marijuana and a lot of scenery inside the theater. The funeral was inside the theater because she was a theater actress. So we didn't want to do it in a, I don't know, Christian chapel, or something like that. We wanted her. She was atheist, and we wanted to have her have a funeral, very uncommon funeral, and it was a beautiful funeral. So at that point, I decided that I want to tell her story. But many years passed before I really took the courage to write it, because it was very difficult, because I was still in grief. So I finally took the courage and I wrote it. It was very personal, and I cried a lot writing it, and then I cried a lot again filming it, because it was so personal. And to put these amazing actresses playing the role of my mother, my grandmother, and in the case of the daughter Joanna, it's a mix between my daughter and myself. So many things that Joanna says, I absolutely identify, because they happened to me. They were said by me, or listened by me. So it was very emotional. It was a very emotional film to do.
And how did the political and social climate of Brazil during the military dictatorship influence the film?
Yeah, the dictatorship was very, very powerful and very destructive in Brazil. Most of all, it was destructive of the arts, the culture. So our artists were, I mean, devastated by the dictatorship. Most of them were either exiled or imprisoned or tortured or even killed. Most of the more important ones, the more relevant ones, were like that, and the ones that survived and that didn't get killed or exiled, they were left in a no man's land, in a place where there was no money for arts anymore. So there was no cinema, there was no theater, there was no money for to pay for a writer to borrow, to write a book, musicians. Everyone was really fucked up. So yeah, so I think Malu is kind of a product of this dictatorship, because she's from a generation that was thriving in the 60s and the beginning of the 70s in political theater, and there was a lot of theater. São Paulo mainly was a place where theater was thriving. It was so strong, and so many people. The theaters were packed with people, with the public. But then the dictatorship destroyed that. So suddenly, the only way to for an actor or an actress to earn any money was television, and television is a very was at least a very cruel medium, where if you are a 50 years old woman that's not an example of beauty, and you are not famous already, you are not going to thrive. You're not going to get any jobs. So yeah, she was destroyed by the dictatorship, and I think many people relate to the film in Brazil because of that. Many people who are older than me come to talk to me. Yeah, I can relate totally to her, because I am from this generation that was destroyed by the dictatorship.
Okay. And there was a specific aspect ratio, like why you choose that.
The aspect ratio, Yes, I feel that I always wanted that aspect ratio even before the photographer, the cinematographer came into the film, because I wanted to have this feeling of confined space, claustrophobia. She can't go left, she can't go right, she has nowhere else to go. She's confined in that place. She's confined without a job, she's confined without a love, she's confined with that mother living in that house, in that unfinished house. So the confination was important to me, the sense of claustrophobia. At the same time, when you have a close up, you have a close up, so you have a face in the screen, and you have this aspect ratio. You just have the face, so the face becomes the whole map, the whole geography that you have to discover, to your eyes to explore. When you have the wider shot, the wider aspect ratio, you have the face, but you have everything else. So I wanted to confine the view of the viewer to the face. You just have this face to look at. You don't have anything else. So you have to look at this face. And the third reason for this aspect ratio 4:3 is that I wanted to also use the same aspect ratio that television used in the 90s, when the film is set. So somehow it's like I'm giving Malu the possibility of having this this show where she can appear, that maybe she wanted to appear in a television show but she couldn't, so now she can have this opportunity.
And how was it like working with the actress? Because you also have done theater, like your mother was a theater, and this film is also very personal, and the acting is performance is fantastic. So how was it working with the actress as well?
Yeah, I worked with them for 3 weeks in rehearsals. We had 3 weeks rehearsals where I worked with improvisations most of all. We never memorized the lines in the rehearsals. We only improvise each and every scene. Like scene one, let's improvise scene one. We read the scene one and then we improvise scene one, and then scene two, let's read once, understand what's the scene about, and then improvise the situation. So we just improvise the situations, never learning the lines. Then after 3 weeks, I gave them 1 week of rest, kind of rest, but I asked them to use this 1 week of rest to memorize the lines. So now it was a time to really memorize the lines and to have them by heart, because we didn't have too much time to shoot. We just have 3 other weeks to shoot, so we had to shoot really quickly, like 6 to 7 pages per day with one camera. That's a lot, you know so that's why you see a lot of sequence shots in the film. We just one shot and that's it. We didn't have many points of view from the camera, because we didn't have time for that. Yeah, so when they memorized the lines, they said to me that they had the feeling that they had already memorized it, because they already knew the situations from inside. They had already lived these situations emotionally in the improvisations. So they said that it was really, really easy to memorize the lines, because they already knew them. It was just choose this or that word to say what they already wanted to say. So that gave us not only the what you see in the screens, that very very natural, very spontaneous acting that I like in the movie, because I'm very happy with the acting in the movie, because I feel it's very spontaneous, it's very live, it's very alive. And but also we had another thing that you can watch in the screen, but I can tell you that we were very, very quick shooting, because we never ever ever had a problem of someone losing the line, forgetting the line. Never. I can't remember once that we had to stop because the actress forgot the line. It never happened, because if maybe they forgot the line, if she just she just would invent another line. She was used to the improvisation so much that she just said whatever came into her mind, and most of it was what was written, but a lot of it was improvised, you know. So yeah, that was very. I'm very happy with the acting in the film.
Great, and the acting is fantastic. Was there any reference as well? Because as you said, like you have seen Faces and John Cassavetes, because it reminded me a little bit of A Woman Under Influence by Cassavetes. So was there a movie reference as well?
Yes, a woman under the influence was the biggest influence, of course. Yeah, I think that's clear in the film. The madness of Mabel, played by Gina Rowlands in A Woman Under the Influences, has always haunted me and fascinated me from all my life since I watched it. And yeah, I think that the madness of Malu comes from a lot from there, but also Autumn Sonata by Ingmar Bergman was a very strong influence, mainly in the relationship between Malu and her daughter Joanna, and also The Piano Teacher by Michael Haneke was kind of an influence for the relationship between Malu and her mother, Lily. So yeah, I think all these films influenced me a lot.
Was there any specific like example that was very difficult to shoot, or like was a difficult challenge while during making the film?
Uh, yeah, I think the scene where Malu and her daughter fight, they have this huge discussion, and after the rain, there's no light. They are with candles, and they are in they are silhouetted, right? They are in the dark, and that scene was very difficult for me because it was so strong emotionally, because I have lived that night with my mother, you know. So it was a very difficult night to live, and it haunted me for decades. And so yeah, to reenact that situation was almost masochistic, you know. It was very painful, very hurtful, but I knew I had to do it. It was important for the film, and in the end it was kind of curative for me. It was kind of healing for me too. But at the moment, I was crying a lot. And there is something that happened that we did 8 takes, and after the seventh take, I felt that they were very good. They were acting really well, but I felt that it was deeper. You know, it was the situation could go deeper. And then I was crying a lot watching it. And when I went to talk to the actress, they saw me bathed in tears, and they just said, okay, you don't have to say anything, we understand. Like you know, that's exactly what you need to tell us, that this is strong enough, we understand. So the eighth take is very strong. It's the take where that you see in the film, and I think that's when they went deeper, you know. That's when they went deeper and made, to me, the most beautiful scene in the film. But it was really difficult to shoot that. I was crying a lot. I was really devastated. I arrived at the hotel afterwards, like drained, and my energy was drained.
So how does the funding for film, like an independent film, works in Brazil, and how did you get funding and producers for this film?
Yeah, in Brazil, you have two kind of films. You have either the very commercial film, like most of all silly comedies that are really silly. Like I'm not trying to be prejudiced. They are really like they are over the top, you know, extremely silly comedies that most of the times are very commercial, very, you know, they are made to earn money, and they are not made to try to do anything more interesting. They're just meant to make money. And then these comedies, you can find money with some private donors, investors, not donors, investors, or companies that want to invest, because they know that they can gain a lot of money out of that, because they can be successes in the cinemas. The other kind of film is a kind of film that I do, that are arty films. And so these art films are independent films that always depend on the government. Always, I never heard about an art film that was funded by a company. Never heard about it. It doesn't happen. It's just either you have a company backing you up and you have a very silly comedy, or you have an art film and then you have to earn some funding from the government. So yeah, so they have fundings that are public, and anyone can just apply for a funding for your film, and then they decide from they evaluate the quality of the writing of your script and your background, your curriculum, and then they decide who should earn that money. But it's not a lot of money. For example, my film, I think we shot it with around $200,000, around more or less that. It was a very cheap film to do.
So it has traveled all over the world like Sundance. It has come to India as well in Kerala. So what has been the audience reaction all over the world? And like a film like Malu, like find theaters as well in Brazil. Like it has gone to theater as well.
Yes. So we've traveled, as I said, all around the world. The film was shown in Melbourne, Australia, in Kerala, in India, in Cairo, Egypt. It was shown. It's going to be shown now in Uruguay. It was shown all over Brazil, in many cities in Brazil, like 12 cities in Brazil, in the cinemas, and in Rio de Janeiro, it won several awards in the Rio de Janeiro Film Festival, which is considered to be the most important film festival in Brazil. So it won five awards, including Best Film and Best Script for me. So I was very very happy. The audiences all over the world react very similarly, and that's amazing to me, because either in Kerala, in Cairo, or in Uruguay, or everywhere in South Africa. I went to South Africa to present this film, and everywhere the public, the audiences react very emotionally. Many people say after on the Q&A, they say to me, I'm very emotional because of your film, because I related to my mother. I can relate to this mother, to this daughter. I remember my mother. I remember my grandmother watching the film. So it's a film that I think that touches people in this family relationships, way. So yeah, I remember in South Africa, after the screening, the Q&A, a woman, South African, grabbed the mic and said, I'm still shivering because of your film. I'm still trembling. I'm still trembling because of I watched your film. So just give me a minute, because I want to make you a question, but I'm still trembling. I was like, wow. this, this woman comes from South Africa. It's a completely different environment and a completely different universe from mine. So how is it possible that she's so emotional? And then later in Cairo, in the Arab country, this woman came to me the day after the screening and said, Pedro, excuse me, are you Pedro, the director of Malu? I said, yes. I watched your Q&A yesterday. I couldn't make a question because I was too emotional. I was crying a lot, but I just wanted to tell you that I really loved your film. I was so emotional. I cried so much, and I spent the whole night dreaming with your film. And I was like, wow, this Arab woman from Egypt is dreaming and crying with my film. This is so crazy. But that said, in Brazil, it was the warmest of all the receptions of the film. I think Brazilians, because they lived the dictatorship and all that, and they know the favelas, they tend to be even warmer than all over the world. And in Brazil, it was really like, because the film is in theaters right now in Brazil. It's not in festivals anymore. It's in the theaters in 12 cities all over the country, and people get really like, it's kind of, I've been hearing a lot of stories about how people get really what's the word for that? It's like catharsis, collective catharsis. Many people tell me that at the end people were clapping and screaming "yoo-hoo," because and this is in commercial theaters. It's not festivals. People were really emotional about the film, and many people told me that after the film they went to a bar to drink and talk about the film because they couldn't just go home. They had to drink something and they had to talk and talk about the film. Many people told me they spent the whole night talking about the film. And, so there is kind of a catharsis that's happening with this film that's very beautiful. And I'm very happy with the reception of the audiences in Brazil.
Brilliant. So you're a filmmaker, and you might have seen a lot of films. So there are any inspiration, like your favorite films and filmmakers? Are they? You can give me a list, like a number of films and filmmakers. It's not like
Well,
top five or top ten. You can give me any number of films and
okay.
filmmakers.
Well, Cassavetes, most of all, Cassavetes is my favorite filmmaker of all time. As I told you, I really love Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman is also a very huge, huge influence for me in my life and in my films. I also love Tarkovsky. Is a completely different kind of filmmaker than myself. I think I will never try to imitate Tarkovsky because he's impossible to imitate, and it's so specific what he does, but it's so beautiful. I really love Tarkovsky. Yeah, I think these three are the main guys, for me. But also, of course, I love Jean Renoir. It's a huge influence. Orson Welles and Kubrick. Michael Haneke sometimes, not always, because Michael Haneke can be very cruel to his audiences, and I don't like that. But I think Piano Teacher and Cachet are beautiful films that influenced me a lot. And from Brazil, there's a filmmaker that I really love, a great director of actors. He's called Joaquim Pedro de Andrade. Joaquim Pedro de Andrade is one of the most important filmmakers in the history of Brazil, and I really love him. I really love his work. That's it.
Okay, great. So my last question is like, I'm an aspiring filmmaker. So any advice for future filmmakers? Like, what advice would you give to them?
I won't say anything new, but to me, what worked and what I think that what I can feel after doing my first feature film and now walking to do my second and third feature films. Um, I have the feeling that what really worked for me, what really makes the difference for me, is mainly two things. One is devouring a lot of art. I watched a lot of films, a lot of films. There was a moment in my life when I was 19 that I abandoned when I told you that I abandoned the journalism career, and I wanted to go to Madrid to study. But before I went to Madrid, I spent like 1 year unemployed, without a college to study, without anything to do. I had absolutely nothing to do for one entire year. Luckily, I had somewhere to live and some little money to pay my bills, not much. So I could do what I did. That I spent the whole year watching 3 feature films every day, every fucking day. 3 feature films. It was my job. I decided that my job now is to watch films. I wanted to become a filmmaker. Okay, so let's watch the entire Kubrick cinematography. Let's. So I rented. I had this rental store, video store. It was not close to my house. I had to grab a bus, spend 40 minutes in a bus. But there was this great rent a DVD rental store where you had the films by directors. So you have all Kubrick films, all the Bergman films, all Cassavetes films. They were really really good and very comprehensive, and they had all the films from all the greatest directors. So I just did that. I rented like 10 films by Kubrick and spent the week watching Kubrick. Then I gave them back, and now 10, 12 films by Bergman, and then I will spend the whole week watching Bergman. And then Fellini, Cassavetes, you name it, all the greatest one. I watched everything. I watched all the classics, so that was my. I think that was the most important um, uh, uh, education I had in arts and in film. And also, I always liked a lot to read books, to read mainly literature, classical literature. I read Dostoevsky, I read Charles Dickens, I read Machado de Assis, I read Julio Cortázar, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So I read so much that I think that I'm not the most read person in the world, but I really liked reading novels, and I think that also prepared me a lot to write my screenplays. I also read a lot of screenplays. I really liked to. Nowadays, I don't do that so much, but I back in the days, I really liked to download in the internet classical scripts from The Apartment, from Billy Wilder, from Citizen Kane. All these classical scripts that are online. You can just download them and read them in your computer. And they are classes. They are master classes on writing screenplay and cinema. So that's also something that I recommend. And after all that, the thing that I most recommend is to write screenplays and shoot them in short films without money, with your cell phone, whatever. Just shoot, 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 shoot. I once went to, I had this workshop with Abbas Kiarostami, that was the late greatest Iranian filmmaker of all time. To me, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He's one of my favorites. You ask me which were my favorite filmmakers. Abbas Kiarostami should be there in that list, together with Lucrecia Martel from Argentina. Well, I had the opportunity to have this workshop with Abbas Kiarostami in 2016, like months before he died, unfortunately. And he told me once something that I really took my attention. That he said that 20 years ago, I decided. He said, 20 years ago, I decided that if I wanted to be a filmmaker, I had to make films all the time. So I couldn't wait 3, 4, 5 years to do a next feature film. I had to do films all the time. As a writer writes every day, I had to film every day. So I decided that I was going to shoot and edit one short film every month for the rest of my life. So he did that. He was always with this small handheld camera, 4K, with a good mic, and he was always, oh, look at that, a tree. Oh, look at that, a bird. Oh, look at that, a child playing. He was always shooting something, always, always, always. I went with him to the fields, to shoot, and he was all the time shooting something. And he said that every month he was editing a short film with the material that he shot during the last months. And he did that. And he didn't care with the festivals or launching these short films in some way. He was doing it for himself. Sometimes he showed some of it to someone, but it was not for that. It was just for himself, just to practice, to be practicing all the time. So that's what I can recommend. Watch films, read books, and practice all the time.